Good evening, everybody, and welcome. So happy that you're here for tonight's program, Skiing for Oma and Opa, hosted by 3GNY and 3GNJ, and co-sponsored by the Austrian Cultural Forum and the Safe Haven Holocaust Refugee Shelter Museum. Tonight, we're really excited to talk with Olympic skier Avital Carroll, granddaughter of Holocaust survivors Elfie Hendel and David Hendel, along with filmmaker and Johns Hopkins professor Bernadette Wegenstein. I'm Dave Reckes. I have the privilege of serving as executive director of 3GNY and 3GNJ. And like Avital, I am also the grandchild of Holocaust survivors. 3GNY and 3GNJ is an educational nonprofit for grandchildren of Holocaust survivors and our supporters. As a living link, we preserve the lessons and legacies of the Holocaust. Our mission is to educate diverse communities about the dangers of intolerance and to provide a supportive forum for the descendants of survivors. We empower 3Gs to share their stories. Our flagship educational initiative, We Do, which is short for We Educate, engages grandchildren of survivors to compellingly share their families' Holocaust experiences in school classrooms and with community groups. Just this past school year, our 3G speakers shared their family stories with over 38,000 students and community members across New York, New Jersey, and beyond. Through our grandparents' stories, we provide a human face to the past and a living link to the present, inspiring our listeners to stand up to hatred and to act with courage and compassion, something the world desperately needs more of today. We're excited tonight to also be joined by our two co-sponsoring organizations, the Austrian Cultural Forum and Safe Haven Holocaust Refugee Shelter Museum. I'm happy to introduce Paul Lear, president of the board of the Safe Haven Holocaust Refugee Shelter Museum, to say a few words about the museum, which will feature in Avital's story a little later this evening. Paul?
Right. Okay. Thank you, Dave. So I'm on. Good deal. All right. Hello, everybody. I'd like to thank 3G New York and 3G New Jersey for inviting the museum to be a co-sponsor of this wonderful event, Skiing with Oma and Opa. Okay. I'm not a descendant of a Holocaust survivor like Dave, but I am the son and the nephew of men who risked their lives fighting the Nazis and who toured the camps by order of General Eisenhower. I'm privileged to be the president of the museum, Safe Haven Holocaust Refugee Shelter Museum, which interprets the history of the Fort Ontario Emergency Refugee Shelter. The fort was the only shelter for Holocaust victims in the United States during World War II. It housed nearly 1,000, mostly Jewish refugees from August 1944 to February 1946. The museum is located at 22 Barbary Donahue Drive in the city of Oswego in New York. It's situated in the old red brick Army guardhouse where the refugees nearby would check in and out on 6-hour passes. We've got admission fees very low, $10 for adults, $5 for children, 10 and college students. Our museum contains exhibits and original artifacts which tell individual refugee stories and the shelter's place in world Holocaust history. Right? Next year, we're planning exciting events and activities commemorating the 25th anniversary of the opening of our museum. We're working to boost school groups and public attendance, a real big effort for next year. And for years, we've struggled with the fact that the historical significance of the shelter and the existence of our museum is profoundly unknown. We're working to change that as well. H.R. 1031 is a bill in the House sponsored by Congresswoman Claudia Tenney to establish the Fort Ontario National Monument as a unit of the National Park Service. At the moment, it's held up in committee during the blockade that's going on in Washington. But once the bill gets out of committee, we're hopeful that will be approved by the Congress and signed by the president. National monument status will raise awareness of the shelter, the Holocaust, our museum, and provide proof to deniers on American soil at an actual Holocaust site that the Holocaust happened. Thank you very much. Back to you, Dave.
Thanks so much, Paul. And I can speak from personal experience, having visited the museum and toured the fort. It is well worth the visit. It's a fascinating story and a really an important part of understanding Holocaust history and the United States' role in during the Holocaust. So for anyone out there who has not yet been to Oswego, New York and visited the museum, I highly encourage you to take the time and make the trip to do so. Um, so I also want to share on behalf of the Austrian Cultural Forum, whose staff unfortunately was not able to join us tonight, but I'm very happy to share with you a bit about their mission. Located in a critically acclaimed landmark building in the heart of Manhattan, the Austrian Cultural Forum New York is Austria's leading cultural representation in the United States. The ACFNY, as they're referred to, presents highlights of Austrian culture in the US by organizing exhibitions and events in the fields of visual art, music, film, theater, and literature. All of these are open and free to the public. The Austrian Cultural Forum promotes a vibrant exchange between Austrian and American artists, scientists, scholars, and international audiences. We are incredibly grateful for their support, along with that of the Safe Haven Holocaust Museum in Oswego. And now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Avital Carroll. Avital grew up in New York City and started skiing in Stratton Mountain, Vermont, where she fell in love with skiing at a young age. From there, she climbed the ladder and made the United States Ski Team in 2018. She was later blessed with an opportunity to not only ski, but to honor her grandparents and represent her Jewish heritage on the world stage when Austria updated its nationality and citizenship laws, granting her and many other descendants of Austrian Holocaust survivors like her the ability to regain family citizenship. To Avital, this was a no-brainer, as her Jewish heritage means the world to her, and she now gets to share her story around the world, including here tonight with us. In a little while, we'll also welcome Bernadette Wegenstein to discuss the film that she and Avital are making together. And we'll also reserve some time for questions from our audience, so feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A feature on your Zoom screen. But first, Avital, welcome. I want to share with everyone just a little bit about how you and I first met or first connected this winter. I have, as you know, I've always been a huge fan of the Winter Olympics. And so I was following the Milan Cortina Olympics with a lot of excitement, watching as much as I could. And at some point, I saw a brief interview with you, with Avital, talking about your Oma and about her story of fleeing from the Holocaust and how much it meant to you to ski in her honor. I got super excited knowing this work that I do with the 3G community, and I reached out on Instagram and I didn't expect to hear anything. I just said, good luck. We're thinking of you. We're rooting for you. And lo and behold, within a day or two, I got a message back from Avital. And through that conversation, I was over the moon. I was geeking out a little bit. I'm going to be really honest. I like ran to my wife. I'm like, I just got a message from an Olympian. But you were so generous with your time and with, connecting and sharing a bit of your story. And then we got to talk when you got home from the Olympics. And it's been a real treat to get to know you. So for those who are not familiar with Avital, at the Olympics, she had two top 10 finishes, and is considered one of the best athletes in the world in her sport, which I'll let her explain to you in a little while. So Avital, welcome. Thank you for being here. And my first question for you is just, to say hello and tell us what it was like to be at the Olympics, to compete at the Olympics.
Thank you, David. Thanks for those kind words. That's super nice. And I'm just so excited to be here and be able to share my story with you guys because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So first of all, thank you everyone for being here. This is really exciting and so special. And thank you to everyone who made it happen. It wouldn't be possible without you guys. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Avital Carroll. I'm an Olympic mogul skier competing for Austria. I grew up in New York City, went to yeshiva, and chased this dream of going to the Olympics ever since I was 12 years old. And I basically skied through history in Italy at the Olympics, which is crazy as we'll get into later because my family escaped through Italy. So it was a really full circle moment. And being able to compete there and represent my heritage was just so incredibly special and surreal. And I felt like a celebrity for 10 days. And it was just so meaningful and powerful.
Yeah, and can you tell us a little bit about your sport in particular? What is mogul skiing? How does that work? What do you do in a competition?
Yeah, basically to be a mogul skier, you have to have a couple bolts loose in your head. Gotta be a little cuckoo. Um, but it consists of moguls, a jump, moguls, jump, moguls. So it's scored 20% jumps, 20% speed, 60% moguls. And a lot of it is based on technique and then acrobatics. And then the harder the tricks are, the harder the degree of difficulty is. And then you get higher points for that. I just love the feeling of adrenaline, and it's such a fun sport to be a part of.
And I can tell you that watching it, I like as I was watching you skiing and hitting each mogul, each bump, my knees were screaming out in pain for you. But then watching you flip through the air and knowing a little bit about your story, all I could hear is like the voice of 1,000 Jewish mothers in the back of my head saying, "You're doing what in the air with who? Like, how does that work?" So,
Yeah.
is that a thing? Like, was your family like wondering why you were getting into this crazy sport, hurtling yourself through the air at crazy speeds?
Yeah, I mean, I know that when my mom's on this call, and when she watches, I think she literally like closes her eyes and does not watch at all. But we always joke that you can't get hurt in the air, right? Only on the landing. So
So just fly forever and you'll be fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And the more air you have, the more of a break you have from skiing mogul. So then you get a rest.
It's good motivation.
Yeah,
And so this was your first Olympics, right?
yeah.
So showing up and like seeing the Olympic rings and walking through the Olympic Village, being part of that whole, you mentioned that feeling of a celebrity. Um, Talk us through about like, what was it like to be not just at the Olympics, but there as an athlete competing on the world stage? What was going through your head as you were preparing for and completing those races?
Yeah, it was wild. I feel like I was just like switched on all the time. Um, and the most surreal moment, I would say, which sounds funny, but we were in the cafeteria eating dinner one night and they served Olympic rings pasta in Italy. So the pasta was shaped like Olympic rings. And that was really cool. But mostly just having like, media around you all the time. You're walking around, you have to be in your uniform. But the like biggest part of the where we found the most normalcy was on the mogul course.
Mm,
So that was like nice to just kind of be free there. And yeah, I was really proud of my skiing there.
that's great. And again, you skied incredibly well and had some really standout performances. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you mentioned your mom and her not being able to watch as you're hurtling through the air. I know that your introduction to skiing came through your grandparents as well. So
hmm
tell us just a little bit about your Oma and your Opa, your grandma and grandpa. Not even necessarily about their background and story yet, but just what was your relationship like with them? Who were they to you?
Yeah. So growing up in New York, my Oma lived in Washington Heights and my Opa lived downtown. My Opa's name is David Hendel. My Oma's name is Elfie Hendel. And we just saw them all the time. My grandfather would always come over for, Shabbat and definitely Shabbat lunch. And he was just like such an amazing person to be around. We'd always go to Zay bars and get bagels and lox and just like a classic, turned into a classic New Yorker and was just so sweet. And he was just a really good role model. And then my grandma was a very stylish lady, and we would always pick her up on Thursday evenings on the way up to Vermont because she loved to ski and she got us into skiing. She just found the love for it at a younger age and then introduced it to my mom, who introduced it to all five kids. So I have four siblings and we all got into it and loved it. And yeah, we just always spent time with them, and it was really fun growing up with my Oma and Opa so close by.
Yeah, and so you got to ski with your Oma throughout your childhood.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. She was skiing every weekend with us, Saturdays, Sundays, and
So what
was
did
a
she
diehard.
think about you hurtling through the air on the moguls and jumps?
What did she think? I think she was definitely nervous for us, but I think she appreciated it too, and hopefully she was proud that she was the one that, kind of started all of us on that route.
Did she ever do the moguls?
I don't know if I ever got her into the moguls. I don't think so. She was more of a big carve kind of gal down the
Yep,
slopes.
that
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
And the reason that we're here is that obviously both your Oma and Opa were Holocaust survivors. When you were young, did she talk about or did they talk about their experiences, or how did you learn about what they had endured during the war?
Yeah, so I would say my grandfather was a lot more open to talking about it. So
Mhm.
hearing stories from him growing up was definitely common. And he was like able to share that with, um, not too like he was very sad about it, obviously, but with like not too emotion, be able to teach us about it. And I think for my grandma, it was a little bit harder to talk about it, and it was just more emotional and just avoided a little bit more. But has been really cool, especially recently, to learn more and more and just continue to gather information and learn about what they went through.
So this is a relatively new discoveries for you in terms of the details of their life experiences in the war.
I think just always learning, you're just always finding more pieces to the puzzle.
Mm,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So if without going into too great detail, because there's lots that we want to talk about tonight,
Mhm.
uh, but can you give us an overview of where your Oma and Opa were from, like what you know about their pre-war life, and how how they managed to survive during the war?
Yeah. So my Oma was born in Vienna. Her parents were actually Polish and moved to Vienna for better
Mm.
life. And then when my Oma was 7 and her younger sister Marion was 2, they, realized that the war was starting. I think they realized because their dad actually was on a train and he had a realization while he was on this train, like, oh my gosh, I think this train is like headed to Auschwitz. And so he jumped off this moving train, managed to come back home, and was like, we need to escape. Um,
Wow.
so they escaped through northern Italy. They met a family that kind of took them under their wings. They went to school and they stayed there for about a year or two and then eventually made it down to Rome. And my grandmother and her family were able to stay in a convent that hid them.
Oh, and so your Oma was a child at this time, like 7, 8, 9 years old.
Yeah, so I think by the time they made it to the convent, she was maybe about 10 or 11.
Okay.
Yeah,
And and it was her along with her parents in the convent?
with her sister and her mom, just because it was girls only.
Oh, right, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, yeah,
Um, do you know if they had to, pretend to be Catholic and part of the nun or the convent's
yeah,
routines?
yeah. They absolutely did, and I actually learned that on some recent trips to Rome, which we'll talk about later with filming with Bernadette. But my Oma's mom would like make sure to say like the Shema like to them at night to remember that they
Oh,
were
wow.
Jewish, but they had to pretend during the day.
Wow. That
Yeah,
must have been terrifying and also a little confusing for an adolescent, 11, 12-year-old,
yeah.
hearing both of those things and trying to make sense of what's going on.
Hmm.
So how long were they at the convent?
So they were at the convent for a couple years, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. And then they were able to get on the boat. They picked 1,000 Jews to go on the boat from Rome to New York. And that was the USS Henry Gibbons in
Right. And
1944.
this is the Fort Ontario refugee shelter that Paul was talking about earlier, where with the assistance of Ruth Gruber, who got President Roosevelt to finally approve the first and really the only instance of Jewish refugees from Europe to be allowed to enter the United States. And so there were, I think, 982. Paul can correct me later if I'm wrong.
Mhm.
People who were allowed to board the Henry Gibbons and sailed to New York and were then if I understand, remember correctly, the ship was also carrying injured soldiers, bringing them back to the US. And the Jewish refugees, when they got to New York, were put on a train to come up to Oswego and
Exactly.
brought into Fort Ontario.
Yeah.
And so your grandmother and her sister and mother as well were
Yeah.
part of that?
And actually my grandfather's family.
Your
Can,
grandfather too?
yeah, his family convinced my grandmother's family to take this boat because my grandfather's mom and my Oma's mom were both in the convent and became friendly in the convent.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. And so was your Opa or your grandfather's around the same age as your grandmother?
Yeah, he's about 4 years older.
Okay, so he was like
Yeah.
teenager, and so
Hmm.
they got to know each other on the boat, presumably?
Yeah, I think so. I think they met actually in Rome beforehand. My grandfather says they met at a dance, but she never remembered it, I guess. And then they became friendlier on the boat coming over. And it was a 21-day boat
Wow.
journey.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's a long trip.
yeah,
And I know from other stories that once they got to Oswego, that the refugees stayed there in the fort and had a lot of support from the townspeople in Oswego. And then after the war, when the war ended, they were given initially the plan was that everyone would be sent back to their homes in Europe.
yeah,
But when the war ended, they were given the option of like leaving US soil to go to Canada so that they could then apply to
exactly.
here as
Yeah.
refugees.
So my grandfather's, I remember him telling me they actually signed documents saying that like I will return to Europe once the war is over.
Oh, before they got on the boat, they had to do that.
They had, or when they came to
Yeah.
New York. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when.
Wow. Did
Yeah.
either of your grandparents talk about what happened after the war and how they found their way back to New York and started life from there?
Not exactly sure on that. I know they got married really young, and then made their way. They lived out in Utah for a little bit and just out west, and then made their way back to New York.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of an incredible connection and love story that started with the Henry Gibbons and with this opportunity to flee in 1944, right? So the war was
Hmm.
already raging, and people knew what was happening across Europe, and they were part of the only boat bringing Jewish refugees to American soil.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
It's really incredible.
Hmm.
And so as you were growing up and hearing bits and pieces of this story, and then fast forward to just a few years ago when the law changed that made it easier for descendants of um, Austrian Jews to reclaim citizenship. You said, or in your bio, you wrote to me that it was a no-brainer.
Hmm.
Uh, what tell us about what led to that being a no-brainer? Why did you feel so strongly that you wanted to claim your Austrian citizenship?
Yeah, for me, it was just a big part of my family, and I was like, this is a great opportunity to represent my heritage, promote unity in this world, and like just bring the good back. Um, especially during these like sad times, and it's been more meaningful than I could have imagined, and has connected me like back to my Judaism and my roots, just so much.
By going through the process of claiming Austrian citizenship, you felt more connected to your Judaism.
Yeah, and like to my grandparents, and yeah.
Wow. Did your grandparents support that decision and help you go through that process?
Yeah, so I think at first it was definitely bittersweet when I was telling my Oma about it. She has some not the fondest memories while she was over there, but then, as I explained to her, like they're making amends and bringing the Jewish people back and how amazing it is that, they're doing this, then she started to understand. And um, yeah, I think it made her really proud. But she was very blown away when I started speaking some German to her. She was like, "What?"
Really?
Yeah,
Like blown away, surprised, or a little troubled?
just surprised.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And then you had been a member of the US ski team. And so what was the thought process that you had for transitioning or moving over to the Austrian ski team?
Yeah, I mean, as like a older athlete, more adult athlete, it gave the opportunity to kind of create my own schedule and kind of do things the way that I thought would be best for my competitions.
Mhm.
So it worked on both ends, and it was just really special.
And how were you welcomed by other members of the Austrian team? initially, and then also at the Olympics, like as an American, as a a Jewish person who's reclaimed citizenship? Were they like, great, awesome, you're here, or was there any
Yeah.
tension about why you were there or what your role was in on the team?
Yeah, good question. I thought about that too, like when I was first joining, but they honestly welcomed me with open arms and were nothing but sweet and wanted to learn about my story and had other people share their stories. And yeah, so they welcomed me with open arms.
That's wonderful. And
Yeah.
I mean, what you just said, that it led to some sharing of stories about their families and where they're from, and things that are important in their lives. So you were able to kind of create that dialogue among the teammates.
Yeah, amongst the teammates and then also people reaching out on Instagram and sharing their Holocaust survivor stories and like so much overlap of people being in the same places. So just continue to talk about it, never forget. And um, so yeah,
That's
that's a huge
wonderful.
part of what we do. Yeah.
Um, I do have to ask, because in one of our calls preparing for this evening, you let me know that, beyond getting your citizenship, that when you shared with your Oma that you were going to be skiing for Austria, that she wasn't very thrilled initially. So tell us a little bit more about like what her initial reactions were and what you did and how you kind of shifted that.
Yeah, I was honestly a little scared by her first reactions. Like I said before, she didn't have the fondest memories. And at first, she was kind of like, F the Nazis, F the Nazis. And that's what she kept saying,
Seems like a fair response
which is
considering what she had been
absolutely
through. Yeah.
considering what they went through. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then she, I explained it to her more and she understood. And obviously, she loves skiing and then could see the whole picture. But yeah, at first, she was like not happy.
Yeah, but you won her over, which is
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah.
And I know from from my initial messages with you and following your social media, that she got to see you skiing in the Olympics, and then very soon afterwards passed away. So first of all, our condolences on your loss. I know how important she was to you and still is to you. And so what was that like for you to know that your Oma was able to see you ski in the Olympics and represent Austria and represent yourself and her on this global stage?
Yeah, it was almost like the serendipity of life that she was able to hold on. I knew she wasn't doing too well beforehand, and she was with her caretaker, and her caretaker was showing her videos of the Olympics, and she
Mhm.
wasn't fully with it at the end, but she was smiling, and I think she really understood. So to have her pass a day after I got home from the Olympics was, I mean, it's so, yeah, just surreal, I guess, but so cool that she was able to hang on with her. I mean, I think she knew inside. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's such a touching story, and the timing of that it's wild. And the Yiddish word is beschert, right? It was meant to be that she was able to see you and see you succeed and get so many accolades and have the time of your life. Um, it's just absolutely incredible. Um, yeah. So, Avital, I want to shift gears a little bit and invite Bernadette to join us, because I know that you have been working with Bernadette Wegenstein for a little while on a film project that goes a little bit deeper into some of the stories that you've started sharing tonight. And the film is in post-production right now. It's called The Archives. And so I'm going to invite Bernadette to join us on screen. Bernadette Wegenstein is an Emmy-nominated award-winning documentary filmmaker and a professor of media studies at Johns Hopkins University. Her film, The Conductor, premiered at Tribeca, won multiple Best Documentary Awards, and received an Emmy nomination. She was born in Vienna with a family history directly affected by the Holocaust, and so brings both personal and scholarly depth to the archives. So Bernadette, we're really glad to have you here. I know you just returned from Austria last night. So thank you for battling the jet lag to make it on this program with us tonight. And I would
Thank
love
you.
to give you a chance to share a little bit about the project, and either you or Avital to tell us how the two of you met and started working together.
Thank you so much for inviting me to join. It's really been a pleasure listening to Avital and telling the story of her grandmother and her motivation to ski for Austria and to really ski for us not forgetting the Holocaust. Um, So my project relates because it's a film about essentially the question of what will happen when the last Holocaust survivors, such as Elfie, Avital's grandmother, will disappear or will die. And so I asked the question, where are people going to get firsthand information, information that they can trust, and that is based on history and oral or other kinds of storytelling, including, the storytelling by the perpetrators, in that the Nazis, recorded a lot of their atrocities, as we know. So I was asking the question, where are these archives going to, like, how are they going to survive? And who is safeguarding them? Who feels responsibility? And how are people like Avital, the third generation, and then the future fourth and fifth generations going to be able to access these archives? So this is a film that asks these profound questions, and but it is a character-driven film, which means that you're going on a journey with a bunch of characters who are
Mm.
searching archives. And we
Hmm.
have we have two older protagonists in the film who are very savvy, and they have been, documenting their family archives for many years, or they had documented them and then didn't do anything with this archive until they were retired, for instance,
Mm.
and
Okay.
got back to to this. But I was looking for a young voice, somebody who wasn't, a historian. And then I, stumbled upon Avital and her mom, Deborah, at an event at the Cultural Forum, Austrian Forum in New York. And I saw them both on the stage, and they were talking about, their second and third generation points of view, and I was immediately very drawn in by both of them. I really loved Avital and her mom, and the way that they were so natural and they had a real story to tell that was a big one. And I asked them, well, is there something that you're still looking for? Like, would there be a reason to go back to an archive? And I think what really hooked me to portraying Avital's search was the idea of nominating the nun that saved her grandmother as a righteous among nations at Yad Vashem. And
Oh,
in fact,
that was
Yad
something that Avital was interested in pursuing.
she was interested in pursuing, and so was Deborah. But of course, they both said, well, but this is like a long shot. And, we know that this is a very complicated procedure.
Yes.
And I said, yeah, it might be complicated, but this is something that I could actually observe with a camera team and see what happens, because in a documentary, to make it authentic, it's always important that you document something that you don't know what the outcome will be.
Mm.
Because it's a natural quest that you are sending an audience onto a journey, through the eyes or the point of view of a protagonist. Yeah, and
And so
so
you don't know the answer when you start, and
yeah,
that's part
I,
of the
I
discovery process of
absolutely
making the
didn't.
film.
And in fact, I didn't know myself exactly what it would entail. And Avital can tell you the details. It was a very complicated process. But the end of which is that the nun did get this recognition, and we were able to
Wow.
film the, celebration, and also Avital was in the audience, as were other descendants of the nun's
Oh,
children that
wow.
she had saved.
So there were
And
many children in addition to
yeah, there were about 60
Elfie's family.
children,
Wow.
if I'm not mistaken, 40 to 60, right, Avital?
Yeah, I think 60. I feel like the number 62 is sticking out for some reason.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
But
incredible.
for the ones that had survived, there was a lady from Tel Aviv who came to the celebration, which took place in Rome, and then there was Otto Lengi's family. So there were maybe two survivors themselves who had met this nun, and then there were the second and third generation descendants.
Wow.
Um,
And I imagine the nun herself was not living anymore.
She was not living anymore, no. And there were some of her relatives who were
Mm.
receiving this award And, for me, it was important to, like, Avital's story is so different in so many ways. One, because she's an Olympic skier, and that's, as you said, a very particular skill and a particular devotion and dedication. And it drew me in as a documentarian because, there's one rule. If you show somebody on the big screen and what they're doing is more important to them than you following them with a camera team, that's a, rule of thumb that this will be, a good scene or a natural and an Olympic skier with this kind of focus and dedication, has to think of what she's doing and not so much, where our cameras are located. But having said that, I mean, I filmed a very famous conductor and live orchestra performances at the Vienna, concert
Mhm.
house and things like that. So I've been in these situations where people were very focused, but not everybody has been as welcoming and as kind as Avital, because we asked her, could you have a wire so we can hear you breathe, just to get a sense in the editing room of how it feels to fly, as you said.
Oh, wow.
And, we did a practice run that she did where she allowed us to do this. And she was always, she was just really a great person to work with. And so were the other two protagonists that I ended up casting. One is a Brazilian man, and one is an Austrian, or better, she's an American woman, also with Austrian Jewish
Mhm.
roots. Um, so that's something that is very important to making a
Yeah.
film. It's just you want to have a good time, because it takes years. And you want to also, I mean, you can call it access, which is the more formal and not so friendly
Mhm.
word. But of course, it's really about the relationship that the protagonist creates with you, and then
Right.
that gives you this access. But the access
And
is
that's
not,
what creates a powerful story too, right?
it
And that's
creates the
something that we
story.
know from helping 3Gs tell their family stories is
Yes,
that building that connection with the audience through those
yes,
relationships is what pulls
exactly.
people in and makes it a story that's going to stay.
Yeah, and it needs to be a natural storytelling process, at least in my book, in the
Hmm.
sense that there needs to be something more than just wanting to tell the story. And that is something you find in the relationship. And for us, I think it was really getting after that Yad Vashem application,
Hmm.
which was very hard, especially for somebody like
Yeah.
Avital who lives on 2 million time zones and it had to come from her because it needs to come from a descendant. I can't,
Oh, interesting.
submit. Yad
Yeah.
Vashem's number one rule is, well, they need to find the actual voice of the survivor through
Mhm.
some record, some historical evidence, but the quest and the urgency or the desire to prove
Hmm.
this needs to come from the descendant.
Wow.
Um,
Can I
and
jump in to ask Avital, what was it that drove you and your mother to pursue this? I mean, you knew bits of the story about the convent, but what was it that turned you on to say, I want to go through with this. I want to see if we can get them recognized.
Yeah, I would say Sor Maria just saved so many people's lives. And when we realized that this could even be a possibility, it was like, wow, how amazing would this be if she could be, considered righteous among the nations? And I mean, Bernadette's help and kindness was so helpful throughout the whole process, helping us dig through the archives and finding all these documents and everything.
Without Bernadette and the filmmaking process, do you think you would have pursued this and been able to achieve that goal?
I don't know if we would have been able to find everything that we found together. So that was a humongous help and a really cool part of the documentary.
That is really incredible.
but the
Um,
documentary isn't saying that, by the way. We didn't want to reveal that, but I'm very happy to
Oh,
be able to talk about it even in the Q&A,
yeah.
or but in the film I wanted, the viewer not to get distracted. But yes, I mean, one of the things was one of the pieces of evidence was in Naples or near Naples with a uh a priest who was 100 years old and could only speak Italian. And so, I went there in person to talk to him and because I'm also half Italian, so I speak, natively Italian and German. And that was just something, I mean, Avital would have figured it out, she could have sent somebody, but you needed a native speaker for sure to talk
Yeah.
to
The
this
100-year-old
priest, to
priest.
the
Yeah.
100-year-old
Oh yeah.
Franciscan
Wow.
priest.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I want to ask a question, and I'd love to have both of you respond, knowing that the film is in post-production, and we'll talk in a minute about what the next steps are. But what do you hope that audiences will learn or gain from watching this film? And so, Avital, I'll start with you. What do you hope that audiences will take away or learn from this film?
I think honestly, remembering the past and that it exists and that there's all this history, and while it can be hard to watch and see, but just to know that it happened and to be able to talk about it and continue to talk about it and tell the next generations, and having this film now and be able to show that is also really important.
That's wonderful. Bernadette, same question for you. What do you hope audiences will
Yeah.
take from this?
I mean, I think I have different hopes, of different kinds. One is definitely to not forget and to carry memories forward. But to me, this is really a film about the future and not about the past, because it's about the question of how do we access history and truth, in a post-truth and post-memory era. And post-memory means that the memories are no longer, firsthand soon because the witnesses will, have died. Um, and so post-memory means that there needs to be a reliable source that, next generations can look into. And I wanted this to be also, entertaining, quote unquote. So in other words, not everybody's going to go on a 2-year search, but maybe if somebody looks at the film and even identifies one little thing, and I know from our focus groups, many of them went on genealogy websites, or they started asking maybe their grandparents who were still around, or went to that attic where there's this box and archive that nobody has ever gone through. So I wish for those things, but then I have to also say something that that is a little difficult to pronounce at the moment, but this is also a film about the awareness of anti-Semitism and of its rise. And it's
Mhm.
coming at a moment when I think we really need to um, consider that and have the courage to actually put it on the big screen. And so I think hopefully this film will, raise a lot of those questions as well, which will not be
Yes.
an easy task to do, but I think it's a film that really lends itself to that.
Yeah, and those are absolutely critical conversations that we need to prompt and promote and encourage people to have. And I mean, that's what drew me to Avital in the first place, is seeing her during the Olympics using that platform to similarly encourage people to have those conversations, to dig into history, to dig into what the lessons that we have to take for today are. And
Yeah.
it's very admirable. In a moment, I'm going to ask you, Bernadette, to share about what the next steps are for the film and when we'll get to see it. But I want to remind our audience that if you have questions for Avital or Bernadette, please open the Q&A feature in your Zoom menu, or you can feel free to put them in the chat itself. We'd love to bring your voices into the conversation as well. So Bernadette, tell us about what comes next. How and when do we get to see this film?
Well, we have a distribution company called Greenwich Entertainment, and it's actually really nice and rather rare to have already, a distribution before you even have a premiere. And, the distributor recognizes the importance of the film, and the premiere might be this fall. I can't really tell you yet where. But if you, I mean, obviously we will stay in touch, but other people, I'm happy to share an email here in the chat
Okay,
of our main producer, Enrique Landulfo. And you can email him. We are working on a trailer and promotional materials so people can sign
great,
up and find out about the screenings. One of the
great.
things that is sort of holding us back or has delayed the process a little bit is that going back to this question of the Holocaust and its denial or its erasure, which is actually a real thing. I don't know if you've heard about the Wikipedia pages that have been attacked, is the fact that I really want the film to premiere at a non-Jewish festival, at a normal, at just a big, film festival, because
Hmm.
this is not just a Jewish story. This is a
Right,
story about humanity and about genocide, and it's a story that should really concern everybody and does concern everybody. And I really resist the idea that it's a Jewish story, so let's show it just on at Jewish film festivals. And I've had a lot
right,
of requests for those, and we will show them also at the Jewish film festivals. But it's a film that I want to have a broader reach and not be, pigeonholed into the idea that the Holocaust is sort of a Jewish
right.
story.
Yeah, that's a wonderful goal. There's somebody shared in the Q&A to try the Toronto Film Festival. So that if that's not on your list, maybe add that to the list. And for folks in the audience, if you so the email address that Bernadette mentioned is in the chat. We will also follow up with an email to everyone who signed up for tonight's program. And we'll make sure to include that email address as well as the website for the film and ways to follow Avital as well. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A, so folks keep them coming if you'd like. But one of them that I see is, I think for both of you, how the current, or no, this is for Avital, how the current political climate, especially with suspicion of dual citizens, has impacted your situation, if at all, especially as someone who, you travel internationally, you're going here and there, skiing for Austria, living in the US. Do you feel any difference in the last few years?
I would say being a dual citizen, I don't feel many differences, or I haven't come across that. I would say like the one more sadder thing is when I'm traveling through some countries that are more known to be a little bit more anti-Semitic. It's sad, but I try and like hide a little bit, might hide my Judaism a little bit, which is really sad. But I haven't, with the dual citizenship, I haven't noticed any difference.
Okay, good. Yeah. And unfortunately, I think that that's an experience that many Jewish people around the world have had and trying to navigate, how to maintain your own safety while also maintaining the pride in being Jewish. So it's interesting to hear that. And there's a question here that we touched on earlier, but just wanted to follow up with you, Avital. Um, oh no, sorry, this is a different question. I asked how the Austrian team reacted when you joined from the American side. But Anne in the audience is asking how the American team reacted when you went from being a part of the US ski team and then decided to defect or to switch over to the Austrian team.
Yeah, I think the US team was pretty shocked, I would say, is probably the biggest word that comes to mind. Um, and maybe the coaches were uh, just maybe confused or no, I don't want to say the word disappointed because I think they saw how like cool or special this was
Mhm.
for me. And
Mhm.
then amongst my teammates, like they were great and supportive, and we're just so excited to continue to be on tour together. And I still keep a lot of those friendships really close now. So yeah,
Oh, good. So you're still able to be in touch with and ski with some of your teammates from the US team. Um,
yeah.
Interesting.
And we get to travel the world together, and we see each other at every single World Cup stop. Or so yeah, it's really
Great.
nice.
Great. Have you had to learn German or do you know German?
Ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch. Äh,
Great.
I've been learning on Duolingo every day. I think I have like a couple thousand day streak or something. But
Very nice.
yeah, it's harder than I thought it would be, and trying to watch TV shows with German and yeah, but I can get by a little bit.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, there have been some great questions in the Q&A, and one final one is that we have somebody who says that they have additional information about the family, who's a first cousin of your Opa, Edna Weissman Magder. Sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. So Edna, if you want to put your email address in the chat or directly to me, we will make sure that Avital and Bernadette have that and can reach out to you as well. And I want to, we're going to start wrapping up. And Avital, what I want to ask you is to thinking about the experience of working with Bernadette and working on this film, really diving into the archives and ultimately successfully getting the recognition for The Nun. Is there anything that you've learned about yourself and the story and how it impacts you by doing this project?
I think it's just really cool. I mean, Bernadette, I have to say, was very patient with me. It was a lot of learning for me, and she was so nice and so kind the whole time. But yeah, I'm just grateful that we learned so much about my family history together, and that yeah, we had such a fun time doing it as well.
It's wonderful. It seems
Yeah.
like a really incredible journey and a wonderful partnership between the two of you and with the rest of your family as well, Avital. And just getting to know the two of you over the last few months,
Yeah.
there's a lot of mutual respect and admiration that I see. And I think that says a lot about how this relationship and this story has unfolded. So I am incredibly grateful, and I can't wait to see the film. So Bernadette, you will definitely have to keep us posted. And we will also keep all of you posted, all of you watching at home. First and foremost, over the next few days, we will send a follow-up email with a link to the recording of this conversation. So if you want to share it with others, you can do that. It will also live on our 3GNY YouTube channel, so feel free to check that out. You can also view some of our past programs and conversations on that YouTube channel as well. And really, Avital, Bernadette, thank you so much for this lovely conversation, for what you've shared, your openness, your friendship, your willingness to be part of this movement of understanding how, as 3Gs, right, as the third generation descendants of survivors, we all carry the legacy and the memories of our families, whether we know them or not. And so the inspiration that I know I've found in hearing how you have really dug in to try to uncover more information and how that guides the way that you carry yourself in your sport with your teammates and with the world and through media, social media, and just through your general interactions. It is truly inspiring. So thank you. I also want to say thank you to our co-sponsors, the Austrian Cultural Forum and the Safe Haven Holocaust Refugee Shelter Museum. And Paul, thank you for being here to introduce us to Safe Haven. For those of you at home, I see some very familiar folks from 3GNY and 3GNJ programs, as well as some folks who are new to us. We're really glad you're here with us this evening. Please consider making a donation to continue our important work. There's a link in the chat to help you do that. And if any of you are in the New York City area, we will be hosting our Evening Under the Stars on August 4th, which is our second annual summer benefit. It's a wonderful opportunity to celebrate our community, to be together with other descendants of survivors, and continue to support Holocaust education and 3G testimony. So once again, thank you all for taking time out of your evening to be with us. We are grateful for your presence and support, and we hope to see you again soon.